Declare that carried. I think that's carried unanimously. Record accordingly. It takes us to item 10, members. And this is a proposed plan change 83 relating to additions and amendments to Schedule 10. That's the notable tree schedule. This is being moved by Councillor Hills and seconded by Councillor Coombe. We have Tuila Young and Phil Reid with us. Tuila and Phil are in the room, I look up. And welcome, Tuila and Phil. Straight to you, Tuila.
Okay. Kia ora, Chair and members. So agenda item 10 is a report seeking approval to notify Plan Change 83, which proposes to make additions and amendments to Schedule 10, the notable tree schedule. This plan change is one of the 4 accompanying non-IPI plan changes being proposed to notify alongside the IPI. So in addition to seeking approval for notification, the report provides a progress update on the notable tree nominations work that's taken place to date. The report also notes the withdrawal of judicial review proceedings related to the 5th of November 2020 committee resolutions. This proposed plan change forms part of Council's response to those resolutions, which directed staff to begin the work as resources became available. And it also aligns with His Worship the Mayor's press release in February earlier this year. So this plan change has been workshopped with elected members in May, all local boards and iwi authorities in June. And so as feedback is being received, it's being reflected and incorporated into the reporting. I will also point out that in addition to the report, further supporting information was provided following the preparation of the agenda. So these are the notable tree overlay mapping additions and amendments. And so those are available and will be attached to the public minutes following the meeting as tabled documents. So Phil might cover off anything I've missed, and we're also available to respond to any questions. Thank you.
Phil.
Through the Chair, probably the only other point was the engagement with property owners. So with respect to those that were nominated trees and the assessments that occurred, all landowners were engaged with as part of that process. And then if the assessments did identify that the trees were warranting of being scheduled, further engagement occurred with the property owners as well.
Fantastic. Are there questions on this? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. I mean, as we know, we've had a lot of pressure to do a lot more than this. Can you just go over why we can't do as much as we'd like at the moment in terms of, you know, the absolutely thousands of trees that we could put in plan change, but I just think it's been a while since we have really canvassed this, but I know there's people who think we should do a lot more than we're doing. Sorry, thanks, Phil. It's just that, you know, I think it's good for people to be reminded of what the process is and what our scope is. Thanks.
So through the Chair, I suppose the first point to acknowledge is the introduction of the Amendment Act and the IPI and what that did to our work program with respect to trees. So what it did require is us to actually go through and re-justify all of our existing provisions as qualifying matters. And so with the limited resource that we have available to be able to put into this issue, we needed to divert that resource, being Tuila's time, into actually justifying through the IPI the retention of all of our existing all of our existing notable trees and all of the actual rules and standards that go with those trees. It was only then, once that's been able to be done, that the return to the continued assessment of the nominations can occur. So that's why in the report it reflects how far through all of the nominations we've got and our intention to be able to follow through and complete the rest in order to be able to notify the remainder that are deemed to be scoring highly enough around about May next year.
So just so that we really, it's just we're being diverted at the moment because we've had to do this other work. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Coombe. Question, is it? I'll go to Councillor Fletcher.
Mine was a comment.
Comment, okay. I think we'll go to the comments then, starting with Councillor Fletcher. Oh no, I've got one question. Councillor Hills, please.
Yeah, thank you. I guess, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the work that's been going on this for a number of years. I guess, as sort of to what Councillor Cooper's question was, but I'm trying to understand the next, like, how the rolling maul of this happens, because it is complicated. How do we get the next 100 trees? Does this need to come back for a whole nother plan change, or can we attach things to the hearing? This is the difficulty of working under this system we've been given, I guess.
Through the chair, yes, we do need to be very careful with when we do plan changes to a schedule which has got sort of 4,000 to 6,000 items in it. That there's always an opportunity for those plan changes to blow out way out of proportion with the ability to manage the plan change. And so that's why we set the scope of these plan changes quite tightly in order to be able to progress those trees which are the subject of the plan change. And it is why we actually have to have that longer term program of continuing to review the schedule in order to maintain its accuracy. I suppose the main benefit that's coming from this particular plan change is the advent of what we've called the automatic update provision. So we do hope that through passing a provision and getting it into the plan successfully through the hearing process, it will enable us to automatically update the plan without the need for further plan changes. In the instance that, say, a cross-lease happens on a property which changes the address of where the tree is situated, or where there's been a resource consent to remove the tree and it's been proven to have actually been removed. So by taking that type of work away from us as staff to maintain the schedule, it should mean that greater effort can go into actually getting through and assessing those other trees on the schedule that haven't been looked at for some time.
Okay, thank you. So an automatic update, some people might hear out of context and think, I just chuck a tree in now, like a new one. So what you're saying is that the current trees on the schedule, if the nature of that property changes, it stays on the schedule with the automatic update. And those that have got a resource consent, we don't have to do a plan change to remove, which means you can use that technical budget to maybe spend more on getting new trees on the list.
Correct.
Okay. The other thing was, what are the main, and it's probably too hard to, but what are some of, or a selection of the reasons that they don't reach the criteria? So it's in here, but I guess when people, or the campaigners, Tree Council, other people have said, I just want those 7 trees, but there's a process that you're refusing them kind of before they even get to the plan. What are the criteria for that, or the common ones?
So I'll start the answer and then I might turn to Tuila if that's okay. So like most of our schedules, we have our objectives and policies that sit in the regional policy statement that guide us in terms of what is deemed to be of sufficient value to actually be in that schedule. So from those objectives and policies, the criteria are developed for the site assessments. And so those have been deployed and used to assess all of the nominations. So I might now turn to Tuila to add to that with the detail.
Yes, so through the chair, just in response to your question about why some of the trees might not make it through to the plan change process. In terms of the nominations database, I'll give you an example that we're looking at the moment. These nominations have been sitting for quite some time, and due to the nature of trees, as they get older, their health can deteriorate. So what's happening is that when the arborist is going out to assess them, in some cases it might be that the tree's just too old now, or its health has deteriorated, so it no longer meets the notable tree criteria. And the criteria as it's written now, it is such so that we identify those trees that are of notable value. So like for me, for example, I'm not an arborist, so to me it might look great, but the arborist might consider that it hasn't met the score that it needs to be added to the schedule. And then also, and there's trees that are being removed as well, just as development increases across the region, which could, between the time that we receive the nomination and the time that we go out to assess it, things could have happened to the tree.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying is that it needs to have robust evidence, like we're doing with qualifying matters, that it's not as simple as community give you 600 trees and they should be, you're actually saying absolutely we'd never win that. The other question I have is, so people can nominate trees on their own properties, but if people are nominating trees on other people's properties, are you having to tell those people, and if they don't want it, do you just leave it, or are there some trees where you just push that through and they'll have to officially appeal it and spend time and money appealing their own tree?
So similar to other schedules, the value is the value that sits on the property, irrespective of the ownership of the property, irrespective of who it was who identified that the value existed. The job of us is to actually look at that value and determine against the regional policy statement whether it truly exhibits that value. If it does, we also then have responsibilities under the Act to engage with the owner of the property to advise them about what has been identified. And that's what I mentioned earlier on, that from the initial suite of nominated trees, we advised all the property owners of our intention to visit the property and have a look at the tree, and have an arborist have a look at the tree. And then subsequent to that, if the tree was found to exhibit those values reflected in the regional policy statement, then we again advise them of that and the intention to follow through to actually propose this plan change, and then their rights to be involved in the process as a submitter, to potentially look to oppose that. We don't have a situation where there is any right of veto, of where an owner can say that simply because of their own wishes, something which is of value according to that regional policy statement, therefore cannot be of value. It is the regional policy statement that drives whether the value exists or not.
And very last question, Chair, thank you for this information. Have you heard or had any more progress on the various letters and discussions we've had with Ministry for the Environment, and the discussions we've had trying to come up with a way to get this into the RMA, the new RMA, whatever that looks like? Have you had any other information on tree protection?
There is engagement that's occurring by Ministry for the Environment across the local government sector. Much of that engagement is at a technical level and is under terms of confidentiality, but I can confirm that there has been engagement with officers at Auckland Council on how urban tree protection is performing and how it could perform in the new regime.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's the questions, and Councillor Coombe, you would like to speak to this?
Tēnā koe, Mr Chair. I'd be delighted to move this. Perhaps could I ask the Chair, are you going to ask officers to leave the table so that we're not arguing with them after all their tremendous work? Kia ora.
Thank you, Tuila. Thank you, Phil.
Tuila. Yeah, I'm very delighted to be able to move this today. I'm sure if the Mayor was here, he would have pulled rank and been the mover, because this is a bit of work that he has been very closely following, and of course been a huge advocate for the reinstatement of the tree protection rules. I know there's a lot of anxiety about what's happening with our urban canopy and with trees being removed for development, and we've just got to pull all the levers that we have to retain trees, but also to plant as many as we can. And I'm hoping Councillor Hills is an encyclopedia when it comes to being able to list all of the amazing work that's going on to increase our canopy and restore our urban ngahere. In terms of this piece of work, it is a very small number of trees that we're notifying, but what is really significant is that we've got this process underway, and I really want to thank colleagues who voted for that amendment, Chair, that you allowed back in 2020, that has kept the door open on this piece of work. So if you remember, we reversed a recommendation that was saying there will be no scheduling because there's no money. We actually got the decision we will do the scheduling when the resources allow. And that has kept the window open really significantly, because I know staff have been, as we know, under huge pressure with the housing legislation, pulled in all sorts of ways. So to be able to kind of get focused on this has been very difficult. But it also meant that we were in a position to mediate with the Tree Council, to be able to say, yes, we're getting the notifications underway. And so I do want to acknowledge, the Tree Council and all of the advocates out there for our trees. I know that they feel, they shouldn't have been having to put so much effort into trying to get this work underway. But but it's everybody, all hands to the pump really, to just try and increase the trees that we are scheduling. And it is only, as I said, there's only a small number, but it's a tool, a lever that council has, and we have to be seen to be doing everything and to actually be implementing it. So I'm really, thanks to all of the team who have been working on this and are getting us in the right direction. And I absolutely, we've got to continue to advocate to government to reinstate the tree protection. That still needs to happen. So thank you, Councillor Hills has been leading that, and the Mayor. That we can now, because of the IPA, we can actually have this opportunity to schedule more trees, which meet the notable tree criteria. So, really pleased to be able to commend this to the committee and this piece of work, and really pleased that we can contribute to enhancing our urban ngāhere. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Coombe. Councillor Fletcher.
Well, it's probably all been said, but this isn't perfect yet, but it's trending in the right direction, and as such, I really welcome it. I want to applaud people like Mark Lockhart and the Tree Council for their advocacy on this. I think, our notable trees are really significant to Aucklanders. So while, and it was good having all of the answers to Councillor Hill's questions, but individual members of the public can come forward, and there is a process that they can be part of should they wish to be. So I just welcome it and hope that there can be a great consensus on moving forward with this as a sensible start. It's just a beginning, but it's a sensible beginning, and I'd like to thank the officers who are here. I was looking for them, for the work that they've undertaken on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Hills, finally, I think.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to also acknowledge the officers and all those advocates, the Tree Council, many members of our community who want to see more tree protection. My questions, I guess, were mostly to show how difficult it is to protect trees group by group, one by one, and the cost and the implications to the council, and which is why we need, it may not be the general tree protection we had before, but some form of protection for our large trees, our important trees, potentially just our native trees, whatever that looks like. We need more protection, because this is not a sustainable way to do this. This is great, and another good move forward. That November decision, we always have to acknowledge, was a couple months after the emergency budget. We were still in the middle of the real unknowns, and we had already tried to ask the council to save 120 million, and we had no budget in that moment. But because, as Councillor Coombe says, we kept that open for as resources allow, the last year or so, staff have been able to kick off this work because resources allowed to add more trees. The other issue is that I think there's an assumption by the community that if they put a tree into the mix, it'll automatically get there. Another reason why I ask those questions for those who may watch this at some point, that there's a lot of work that the public have to do, including submitting on those plan changes and getting the evidence, because we know that if a tree is on a private property or the owner doesn't want it, it's likely the hearings commission is don't put that in if the only person potentially opposing that or submitting is the person opposing it. So it is far more complex than many realise. It is still about $1,500, $2,000 per tree or group of trees to do this. That's a lot of ratepayer money. And I wasn't going to mention the urban ngāhere and the process we've done as a council together, but it is about, in the last 2 years, we've funded 25,000 mature street trees to go into our communities, especially in the communities where we have the lowest tree canopy. It's 200 hectares of additional native forest on our regional parks that has been funded through the 10-year budget. It is all the works that AT, Watercare, Healthy Waters, our parks, community facilities are doing on top of that, which is not down there in a tree by tree sort of instance, plus the Mayor's 1.5 million trees and the funding for nurseries through our climate initiatives, which is will ramp up to about 200,000 seedlings per year for council and communities to use, plus all the great work that our community organisations, including things like Pest Free Kaipatiki and Kaipatiki Project and our ward chair, who just throw out the numbers of plants and pull out the weeds, and that all makes a difference. We know we're moving forward in our public spaces with tree canopy, but we are moving backwards in the number of mature trees in our private spaces, and we know with the MDRS that there'll be further risk to that we need to figure out how we protect it. So it's great to hear that our work, writing many letters to annoy ministers, but also good discussions with David Parker, and it's great to hear there are now really positive discussions with Ministry of Environment staff as well to get whatever those changes look like into the RMA. But I think it is a slow process. But thank you all to move this forward and at least get some more protection for our trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hills and Councillor Coombe, Councillor Fletcher too, and acknowledging Mayor Phil and his leadership in this area, working with others. So that takes us to the vote. It's moved by... Did you want to exercise a right of reply?
To vote, thanks, Chair.
I'm very assertive voter is Councillor Coombe. It's moved, it's seconded. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye.
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 To the contrary, say no and declare that carried. I believe it's carried unanimously, if I can record that.